Okay, this particular update is nothing quite like I was saying. It's nothing really earth shattering in terms of um, what I normally speak about, and nothing particularly factual, because people always kind of term me as a conspiracy theorist. Hey, Tato talks a lot, and this is something that he pretty much just pulls out. And no, I beg to differ on that. But really, what has been the topic of this, what has been happening as of late, is how the NBA has been rigged. Now, I've spoken about NBA before, as in particularly to the social conditioning of society, and the role of entertainment there, and in of it, and especially that I spoke about Kyrie Irving, on a particular episode. And yeah, that is just going back to when the show was still on Jamit and all that. And funny enough, it was something that I was criticized for, because it was like a matter of, oh, why are you talking about the NBA and all of this? Because isn't your show supposed to be this? And you're just talking about everything, and your show is everything is pretty much all over the place. Just one of the things that you was just to justify why I should stop doing what I'm doing. However, I'm like, no, listen, God is in everything. There's a spiritual war in that. And if you recall that I was talking about the fact that Kyrie Irving mainly, and what you should not miss, was just talking about and challenging this notion of saying as to, what actually constitutes being Jew. Now, of course, I did not agree with that whole Hebrew Israelite theology, and I've specified why in that particular prophecy and the particular episode. And I was quite emotionally charged there, which I do admit, and I was just annoyed. So I just spoke straight from the heart on that one. And I'm going to do the same over here. And the main thing was this: when the NBA, when this whole thing about the Dallas Mavericks getting the number one pick, especially after being forced to sell number one their number one guy at the time was Luka Doncic, and they get the number one draft pick now. And Luka Doncic was just given away to the Lakers for an injury prone, and of course, not necessarily, I won't say over the hill, but in terms of his latter years of his NBA playing career, and injury prone superstar in Anthony Davis. And of course, when you look at it on paper, it should be a matter of, well, okay, yeah, only statistically does it sort of make sense, but not even quite, because Anthony Davis was the second fiddle to LeBron James in Los Angeles. And yeah, they needed the Los Angeles Lakers, of course, who don't believe in building through the draft. They just always have to have the ready-made talent. Now, having said that, they just it was just a game of course, moving musical chairs so that the ratings stay within the top tier and the most decorated franchise of the NBA. Of course, the Boston Celtics, of course, have something to say about that, because they've now gone ahead in terms of the championships. But it's still a work in progress, where it's still like, well, look, they need to keep up the illusion and keep up the fan base so that the merchandise still goes up. And that's all it's about, as far as sports entertainment and all of this, and especially the amount of money that goes into this. And behind the scenes, there's the betting and many sort of weird things that goes with that. Now, like I'm saying, it's not going to be of interest to everyone, and I'm not making this about the NBA as per se. What I'm just looking at, the fact is that the social programming component, right? And people are saying, but how can the draft, which is audited by all these firms, as in, your big four audit firms and all this in the world, like, you've got your KPMGs and your PwCs, etc. And I'm saying that, hang on, people are missing the point here. And here's the thing, though. If you remember that the NBA commissioner is Adam Silver. Now, Adam Silver is a Zionist. Adam Silver is one who pretty much claims to be Jewish. Of course, I'm not saying he's not Jewish, and that's not why I'm going there. But I'm saying he's supposed to be a practitioner of the law if he's saying he's this. And of course, he wanted to first hit Kyrie Irving for merely speaking about what the Jew, or what actually constitutes a Jew, and had to give an apology. And I'm saying, if Kyrie Irving had actually been Christian and actually been convicted in his own faith, he would have been able to articulate why he was actually quite right to do what he did. Because there was nothing wrong with challenging the fact that, hang on, you're not supposed to exactly keep the law, because there's a problem with that. And that's exactly what they're all trying to ascertain. And here's the other kicker of this, and why I'm telling people why they are so advocating for keeping of the law. And quite essentially, they were able to fool the rest of the world. How? Because, of course, the audit firms can do the old checks and making sure that the ball comes out and everything. But here's one thing: the optical illusion of the occultic, meaning that the reason why they do this is that they're justifying why they go to altars and make animal sacrifices. Why? Because they can get these demonic magical powers. That's right. These illusionists are always there. Now, picture this, and picture me rolling, like Tupac says. David Sterling was the previous NBA commissioner, who of course has now departed and has passed away. And then came Adam Silver, who I've just discussed and just pretty much discussed as the new commissioner and who has come in. Now, if you take that together, what do you get? Sterling Silver. David Sterling. Adam Silver. And then you get David Copperfield, who is the illusionist and magician. And then what do you get? Aha! Magician, magic tricks, sterling, silver, Copperfield. Gold, silver, bronze, Copperfield. Get it? Okay. That was horrible. That was absolutely terrible. But stay with me on here and get the common denominator. So you got, even in the Old Testament and everything, and of course the practitioner there of darkness, is that they would go to these demonic altars and make these sacrifices to, and then they'll be getting these powers so they could pull off these tricks. It's a bet. That's why Nico Harrison from the Dallas Mavericks was able to be so convinced and stay still and be like, yeah, we've got this. And that is why people decide to keep these the law as to appear righteous in the world's eyes and everybody, that they belong to a religion, and of course they, even if it's a false one, because they want the benefit or the actual jewels of appearing like, well, they still are operating like normal human beings, but essentially they just pull the trick and pull the wool out of people's eyes. So yeah, I know I'm grasping at trees and I'm grasping at things, but I can tell you that those things are very true and those things are very real as to what happens in the occultic, and as to why this happens and why they want to hold on to those demonic powers and those demonic creeds and all that, because of the fact there are benefits to them. And they can pull off the biggest trick in there. And, we've already read in the whole beast system how the second beast was able to pull off all these signs and wonders. And we saw even when Moses went to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's people had to come in and they created those snakes. Those things still exist. Those things still do happen. I'm telling you, I've personally seen them. For real, though. Of course, I don't conjure up anything, because at the end of the day, man, whatever I do whatever as God actually wills, and what He wills to do, and in any sort of situation where He wants to impart His Holy Spirit, that's how I move, But them, they like to be in control, and they like to sort of break the rules and do certain things, and they'll walk away scot-free. Now, that sounds like, oh yeah, no, Tato's just talking rubbish. Of course, whatever. I couldn't care. I know exactly what I know, and that's it. However, these audit firms, let me tell you something. Back in the day when I went to an interview, and I'm talking about, it was late 2010, I still remember, they had a system where these audit firms actually were calling people up. And I remember I was actually in a graduate program, and I was like, okay, of course, I just thought, let me give it a try, because I saw wanted out of this company. And at the time I think I was about 27. Yeah, I was 27. And then they wanted to actually have a whole system where they had I think it was from 22 to 35 to be qualified for that graduate program. But, the recruiter there, even from the onset, was kind of a little bit weird to me, where they were like, no, we think you're a bit too experienced for this and whatever, meaning that, yeah, they had a problem with my age, in other words. But anyway, they were still going to have this process. And after the interview, they said to me, can you come for the selection test? Which is yeah, cool. So I went for the selection test. And guess what? They were psychometrics. And here's the funny thing. There were people who were there that had already met the client and had already underwent psychometric tests, and they were allowed to repeat it. Now, why were they allowed to repeat the psychometric tests? Of course, in the psychometric manuals and all this, and of course the code of ethics, a person is only allowed to see a psychometric test once in 5 years. But they were allowed to see those psychometric tests within a space of a few 2 weeks, which means that they could increase their scores. So what am I saying? It was a result that was already manipulated, meaning that they were allowed to do the whole repetition side of it so that it looks like it was legit and they had better scores than everybody, so they can embellish them in front of the executives and justify their processes and say, hey, look, it was clean. And the audit firms were doing it on behalf of other corporates. So these audit firms, I can tell you, that are there to serve the interests of the greed and just to look like it appears clean. That's all it is. It's just filthy representations. And also, when I come back, remember I promised to have Trey again on the show to justify certain things and to speak about certain elements as to what happened to the whole accident that I spoke about. And involved in all of this was an audit firm. But I'm not going to give too much about that. But essentially, they're there to look like things are supposed to appear more magical than what they actually are. So you can call me conspiracy theorist and stupid. I know who I serve. And let me tell you something. When they wanted to change the show, not to glorify Christ, they come back to me and say, why don't you turn this into a conspiracy theory show? And I'm like, no, because I can tell you the knowledge and the revelations it comes from. I have to state that it comes from the one and only true living God. So ain't nobody telling me nothing else. If you want to rubbish it as conspiracy theory, well, that's on you. And you'll look stupid in the end anyway. I'll be back with a final segment of the show and speak more on that.